She walked into a $47 million mansion wearing a cream-colored gown, 14 weeks pregnant with a secret no one knew.
Did you see the look
By
on
the
her
end of the
face when I
night, that
mentioned
same
the
dress would be
trusts?
stained with red wine. Her husband would
Marcus,
try
you
to
are
have her
terrible.
committed to a
Cheers.
psychiatric facility, and
I
his
assure
mistress
you all,
would be
this is a
laughing in her
deeply
face in
saddening
front
turn
of
of
200
events.
guests.
My heart goes out
But
to
here
Claire.
is what
He's lying.
nobody expected.
He did this to me.
The
Don't let
woman
him
they
do
thought
this.
was weak, she had been building a case for 5 years. The mansion they thought belonged to her husband, it was secretly hers. And the father-in-law
Ledgers don't
everyone
lie,
assumed
Marcus.
would protect his
Everyone
son.
can see the truth now.
He was about to deliver
Claire,
a slap that
wait, let's
echoed
talk
through
about
marble
this.
hallways and shattered an empire. This is the story of Claire Montgomery, a woman who spent 5 years learning to be invisible and one night becoming the most powerful person in the room. If you have ever felt silenced, overlooked, or underestimated, this story is for you. Stay until the end because the final twist will change everything you thought you knew. And if this story moves you, drop a comment telling me your favorite moment. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss another story like this. Share it with someone who needs to hear that it is never too late to find your voice. Now, let us begin. She stood in a $47 million mansion that secretly belonged to her, wearing a dress stained with red wine, while her husband's mistress laughed in her face. What happened next made the entire Montgomery empire crumble in a single night. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. Let me take you back to that morning, before the crystal chandeliers witnessed betrayal, before the guests gasped in horror, before a slap echoed through marble hallways and changed everything. Claire Montgomery woke up at 6:30 in the morning, long before her husband stirred beside her. She had learned years ago that the quiet hours before dawn were the only ones that truly belonged to her. In a marriage where she had slowly become invisible, these stolen moments of solitude felt like small acts of rebellion. She slipped out of bed without making a sound and padded barefoot to the bathroom of their Greenwich estate. The cold tile against her feet sent a shiver up her spine, but she welcomed it. The sensation reminded her that she was still alive, still present, still real, even when everything in her life made her feel like a ghost haunting her own home. Claire stood in front of the mirror and studied her reflection. At 32 years old, she still possessed the same delicate features that had caught Marcus Montgomery's attention 7 years ago at a charity gala in Manhattan. Her dark hair fell past her shoulders in gentle waves. Her green eyes, once bright with hope and ambition, now carried shadows that no amount of expensive concealer could hide. She placed her hand flat against her stomach and held her breath. 14 weeks. She was 14 weeks pregnant, and she had not told a single soul. The pregnancy test still sat hidden in a locked drawer in her private study, alongside documents that could change everything. Documents she was not yet ready to use. Secrets she was not yet brave enough to reveal. Claire whispered to her reflection, her voice barely audible even to herself. Just get through tonight. Smile. Do not cause problems. That is all you have to do. She had repeated these words so many times over the past 5 years that they had become a mantra, a survival mechanism, a way to shrink herself small enough to avoid her husband's criticism and her own crushing disappointment. Her phone buzzed on the bathroom counter. A text message from Marcus illuminated the screen. Wear something elegant tonight. Dad is announcing the CEO succession. Do not embarrass me. Claire read the message 3 times. No good morning. No inquiry about how she slept. No acknowledgement that she was his wife, his partner, the woman who had stood beside him through 5 years of marriage. Just an order and a warning. She set the phone face down and gripped the edge of the marble counter until her knuckles turned white. Here is what no one tells you about marriages that die slowly. They do not end with dramatic fights or thrown dishes or screaming matches in the middle of the night. They end with silence. They end with text messages that treat you like staff rather than a spouse. They end with the gradual realization that you have been erased from your own life, one dismissive comment at a time. Claire had learned early in this marriage that keeping quiet kept the peace, but peace bought with silence is just a slow death. She knew that now. She had known it for longer than she wanted to admit. The problem was that knowing something and doing something about it were 2 entirely different things. She showered quickly, dressed in a simple robe, and made her way downstairs to the kitchen. The Montgomery estate in Greenwich, Connecticut sprawled across 12 acres of manicured grounds. It was the kind of house that appeared in architecture magazines. the kind that made visitors gasp when they drove through the iron gates for the first time. Claire had gasped once, too. 5 years ago, when Marcus first brought her here, she had believed she was stepping into a fairy tale. Now she understood that fairy tales were just stories we tell ourselves to avoid facing harder truths. She poured herself a glass of water and stood by the window, watching the morning lights spread across the gardens. Tonight, this house would host the Montgomery family's annual gala. 200 guests would fill the ballroom, champagne would flow, and Richard Montgomery would announce which of his children would succeed him as CEO of Montgomery Holdings. Everyone assumed Marcus would receive the position. He was the eldest son, the obvious choice, the golden boy who had spent his entire life preparing for this moment. Everyone also assumed Claire would stand beside him, smiling, supportive, playing the role of the perfect wife. What no one knew was that for the past 2 years, Marcus had been openly carrying on an affair with a woman named Victoria Sinclair. Not secretly, not discreetly, openly, as if Claire's feelings, Claire's dignity, Claire's very existence did not matter at all. Victoria had started as an event planner hired to coordinate Montgomery Holdings' corporate functions. Within 6 months, she had become Marcus's assistant. Within a year, she had become something far more dangerous. Claire had confronted Marcus once early on, when the rumors first reached her ears. He had laughed in her face. Victoria understands ambition, he had said. She understands what it takes to succeed. You have always been too soft, Claire. Too emotional. Too weak. She had not confronted him again. Instead, she had done something far more strategic. She had started paying attention. She had started keeping records. She had started building a case piece by piece, document by document, preparing for a day she hoped would never come, but knew was inevitable. The locked drawer in her study contained 5 years of carefully gathered evidence. Bank statements showing suspicious transfers. Photographs taken by a private investigator she had hired 18 months ago. And something else, something she had discovered only 3 weeks earlier. Something that changed everything. But she was not ready, not yet. The timing had to be perfect. Her phone rang, startling her from her thoughts. The caller ID showed Dana Williams, her best friend from college and one of the most formidable divorce attorneys in Connecticut. Claire answered on the second ring. Good morning, Dana. Please tell me you are not actually going to this circus tonight. Dana's voice carried the sharp edge of someone who had spent 2 decades arguing in courtrooms. I have seen the guest list. Half of Manhattan society will be there, which means half of Manhattan society will be watching Marcus parade around with that woman while you stand in the corner pretending everything is fine. Claire sighed. I have to go. Richard specifically asked me to come. There was a pause on the line. Richard? Marcus's father? Since when does he invite you personally? I do not know. Claire frowned, remembering the brief conversation she had with her father-in-law 2 days earlier. He called me directly, said it was important that I attend, said there would be an announcement I needed to hear. Dana's voice sharpened with concern. Claire, listen to me. When someone who has been ignoring you suddenly pays attention, it is either very good or very bad. Either way, you need to be ready. Ready for what? For whatever happens tonight. Dana paused again. Do you still have the files, the evidence you have been collecting? Claire glanced toward the hallway, toward the study where her secrets waited. Yes, everything is secure. Good. Keep your phone charged. Keep my number on speed dial. And Claire, yes, if things go wrong tonight, if Marcus tries anything, if that woman pushes too hard, you call me immediately. I do not care what time it is. I do not care what is happening. You call me and I will be there within the hour. Claire felt tears prick the corners of her eyes. She blinked them back. Thank you, Dana. That is what friends are for. Now go put on something gorgeous and show them all what they are too blind to see. The call ended, but Dana's words lingered in Claire's mind as she finished her morning routine and began preparing for the evening ahead. She did not know it yet, but tonight would be the night that changed everything. Tonight, every secret would be revealed. Every lie would be exposed. Every carefully constructed facade would crumble into dust. And Claire Montgomery, the woman who had spent 5 years learning to be invisible, was about to become the most visible person in the room. The Montgomery Gala officially began at 7 in the evening, but the staff had been preparing since dawn. By the time the first guests arrived, the mansion had been transformed into something out of a dream. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across the ballroom's marble floors. A 12-piece orchestra played softly near the grand staircase. Waiters in crisp white jackets circulated with silver trays bearing champagne flutes and delicate hors d'oeuvres. The air smelled of expensive perfume and fresh flowers, of old money and older secrets. Claire descended the main staircase at precisely 7:15, timing her entrance to coincide with the bulk of arrivals so she would not stand out. She had chosen her dress carefully, an elegant cream gown that was beautiful but understated. She had learned years ago that in the Montgomery family, the wife was expected to complement her husband, not compete with him. The fabric flowed gracefully as she moved, and the color made her dark hair and green eyes stand out in a way that was flattering without being attention-seeking. She wore simple pearl earrings that had belonged to her mother and a thin gold bracelet that Marcus had given her on their first anniversary, back when he still pretended to love her. She spotted Marcus immediately. It would have been impossible not to. He stood near the center of the ballroom, surrounded by admirers and sycophants who laughed too loudly at his jokes and nodded too eagerly at his opinions. He wore a custom-tailored tuxedo that probably cost more than most people's monthly salaries. His dark hair was perfectly styled. His smile was perfectly practiced. Everything about him radiated confidence and privilege, and the unshakable belief that the world existed to serve his needs. And standing right beside him, close enough to touch, was Victoria Sinclair. Claire felt her stomach clench, but she kept her expression neutral. She had practiced this face in the mirror countless times, the face that showed nothing, the face that revealed no pain, no anger, no hurt, the face of a woman who had learned to survive by becoming invisible. Victoria wore a red dress that clung to every curve of her body. The color screamed for attention in a room full of pastels and neutrals. Her blonde hair cascaded over her shoulders in perfect waves. Her makeup was flawless, her jewelry expensive, her smile triumphant. She looked at Marcus the way a cat looks at a mouse it has already caught, possessive, satisfied, hungry for more. Claire made her way through the crowd, accepting polite greetings and exchanging meaningless pleasantries with relatives and business associates she barely knew. Everyone smiled at her. Everyone asked how she was doing. No one actually wanted to know the answer. That is the thing about high society. Everyone is too polite to acknowledge the elephant in the room, even when the elephant is wearing a red dress and hanging on your husband's arm. Claire had just reached the refreshment table when she felt a presence beside her. She turned to find Richard Montgomery, her father-in-law, watching her with an expression she could not quite read. At 68 years old, Richard Montgomery remained an imposing figure, tall and broad-shouldered, with silver hair and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. He had built Montgomery Holdings from a small real estate firm into a $2.3 billion empire through a combination of brilliant strategy, ruthless determination, and an absolute refusal to accept defeat. He was also the only member of the Montgomery family who had ever shown Claire genuine kindness. "You came," he said simply. "You asked me to." Claire studied his face, searching for clues about what he was planning. His expression gave nothing away. "You look tired, Claire, but you also look prepared." She frowned slightly. Prepared for what? Richard's lips curved into a small, mysterious smile. "For whatever happens tonight. Stay close. And whatever you do, do not leave before my announcement." Before Claire could ask what he meant, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd of guests who parted for him like water before a ship. She stared after him, her mind racing. Richard had never spoken to her like that before. Never with such intention, such weight, such meaning behind every word. Something was happening tonight, something beyond the usual family politics and corporate maneuvering. But what? Claire did not have time to consider the question further, because at that moment she became aware of movement in her peripheral vision. She turned her head and felt her heart sink. Victoria was walking toward her, not drifting casually through the crowd, not making polite rounds among the guests, walking with purpose, with predatory grace, with the confidence of someone who believed she had already won. Marcus followed a few steps behind, champagne flute in hand, watching the scene unfold with the lazy amusement of a man who expected to be entertained. The guests nearby seemed to sense the tension building. Conversations quieted. Heads turned. A small circle of space opened around Claire, isolating her, making her the center of attention she had tried so hard to avoid. Victoria stopped directly in front of her, close enough that Claire could smell her perfume, something expensive and floral that probably cost more than Claire's entire outfit. "Oh, Claire." Victoria's voice dripped with false sweetness. "I almost did not recognize you. That dress is so simple. But I suppose not everyone can pull off something more sophisticated." Claire kept her expression calm, her voice steady. "Thank you for your concern, Victoria. You look lovely too." Victoria's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. She hated when Claire refused to take the bait, refused to engage, refused to give her the satisfaction of an emotional response. "You know, it takes real courage to show up tonight." Victoria leaned in slightly, lowering her voice just enough that the surrounding guests had to strain to hear. "Everyone knows Marcus is going to announce our engagement soon. It must be so humiliating for you." Claire felt her pulse quicken, but she did not let it show. She had endured worse than this. She had endured years of worse than this. "I am his wife, Victoria. Whatever you think is happening between you and my husband was his wife." Victoria cut her off with a sharp laugh. "Past tense, darling. Everyone here knows your marriage is over. You are just too pathetic to accept it." The word pathetic hit Claire like a physical blow. Not because it was true, but because Victoria said it loudly enough for at least a dozen people to hear. She saw the shock on some faces, the barely concealed delight on others, the uncomfortable shifting of those who did not want to be associated with the scene unfolding before them. Marcus stood behind Victoria watching. He said nothing. He did nothing. He simply sipped his champagne and waited to see what would happen next. Claire understood then, with perfect clarity, that this was not a spontaneous confrontation. This was a performance. Victoria and Marcus had planned this, had coordinated this, had decided together that tonight would be the night they publicly humiliated her. But understanding their plan did not tell her how to stop it. Victoria picked up a glass of red wine from a nearby waiter's tray. She swirled it casually, examining the deep burgundy color against the light of the chandeliers. "You know what, Claire? Your dress needs something. It is so plain, so boring, just like you. Let me help." Claire saw what was about to happen a split second before it did. She tried to step back, tried to move out of the way, but Victoria was faster. The wine splashed across Claire's chest in a crimson wave, soaking through the delicate cream fabric instantly. The cold liquid ran down her skin, dripped onto the marble floor, stained everything it touched. The ballroom fell absolutely silent. 200 people stood frozen watching, as Claire Montgomery stood in the center of the room with red wine streaming down her ruined dress like blood from an open wound. Victoria smiled sweetly and spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "Oh no." She tripped and spilled on herself. Poor thing, she has always been so clumsy. And in that moment, Claire understood that everything she had feared, everything she had tried to avoid, everything she had prepared for in secret had finally arrived. Tonight was the night. There was no going back. For a long moment, no one moved. The orchestra had stopped playing. Conversations had died mid-sentence. Even the waiters stood frozen with their silver trays, afraid to break the terrible silence that had descended over the ballroom. Claire looked down at her ruined dress. The wine had spread across the cream fabric in dark, irregular patterns that looked disturbingly like wounds. She could feel the cold liquid seeping through to her skin, could smell the sharp alcohol mixing with her perfume, could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. 200 people were watching her. 200 people had witnessed her humiliation. 200 people were waiting to see what she would do next. Victoria stood before her with that triumphant smile still plastered across her perfect face. Behind her, Marcus had not moved, had not spoken, had not made any attempt to help his wife or stop his mistress. He simply watched with that same lazy amusement, as if Claire's destruction was a show put on for his entertainment. In that moment, Claire made a decision. Not a conscious choice based on careful consideration and strategic planning, but something deeper, something instinctive, something that rose up from the part of her soul she had spent 5 years trying to silence. She would not cry. She would not run. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Victoria's smile faltered slightly as the seconds stretched on and Claire remained standing, remained composed, remained stubbornly refusing to fall apart. "Oh, come on," Victoria said, her voice carrying clearly in the silent room. "Are you not going to say anything? Are you not going to cry and run away, like we all know you want to?" Claire met Victoria's eyes and spoke in a voice that surprised even herself with its steadiness. "I will not give you the satisfaction." The crowd stirred. Whispers began to ripple through the guests. That was not the response anyone had expected. Before Victoria could reply, Marcus stepped forward. He wore an expression of exaggerated concern that fooled no one who knew him. "For God's sake, Claire." He kept his voice low, but loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Look at the scene you are causing." Claire turned to face her husband. "She poured wine on me. You saw it. Everyone saw it." Marcus shook his head with practiced sadness. "I saw you stumble. I saw you knock into her glass. What I see now is my wife making a spectacle of herself at my father's event." He raised his voice slightly. "Everyone, please continue enjoying the evening. My wife is not feeling well." He reached for Claire's arm, his grip tight enough to leave bruises. The smile on his face never wavered, but his eyes were cold with warning. "Go clean yourself up," he hissed. "And when you come back, you are going to apologize to Victoria for the misunderstanding. Do you understand me?" Claire stared at him. This was the man she had married, the man she had loved, the man she had given 5 years of her life to, had sacrificed her own dreams for, had shrunk herself smaller and smaller, trying to please. And he wanted her to apologize to the woman who had just publicly humiliated her. "No." The word came out clear and firm and utterly defiant. Marcus's grip tightened on her arm. "What did you say?" "I said no." Claire pulled her arm free, ignoring the flash of pain where his fingers had dug in. "I will not apologize for something I did not do. I will not pretend that what just happened was an accident. And I will not stand here and let you gaslight me in front of 200 people. The whispers in the crowd grew louder. Several guests exchanged shocked glances. This was not how a Montgomery wife was supposed to behave. This was not how anyone spoke to Marcus Montgomery. Marcus's jaw tightened. "You are making a mistake, Claire. The only mistake I have made is staying silent for 5 years." Claire felt something shifting inside her, something that had been locked away for too long, finally breaking free. "But that ends tonight." She turned and walked away from him, from Victoria, from the circle of shocked onlookers. Her ruined dress left a trail of wine droplets on the marble floor. She could feel every eye in the room following her, could hear the explosion of whispers that erupted in her wake. She did not care. For the first time in 5 years, she did not care what anyone thought. Claire pushed through a side door and found herself in a quiet hallway that led to the private areas of the mansion. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was racing. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation was starting to fade, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion and a growing realization of what she had just done. She had defied Marcus publicly. She had rejected Victoria's attempt to humiliate her. She had announced to 200 of the most influential people in society that she was not going to play the victim any longer. There was no going back from that. Whatever happened next, her old life was over. Claire found a small bathroom at the end of the hallway and locked herself inside. For 1 minute, she allowed herself to fall apart. Tears streamed down her face as she gripped the edge of the sink and let out a sob she had been holding in for years. She looked at her reflection in the mirror. Wine-stained, mascara smeared, trembling with a mixture of fear and fury. She barely recognized herself. Then she placed her hand on her stomach, feeling the slight swell that no one but her knew about. "I am sorry," she whispered to the child growing inside her. "I am so sorry you have to have me as a mother. Someone who cannot even stand up for herself." But even as she said the words, she knew they were no longer true. She had stood up for herself tonight. For the first time in 5 years, she had refused to be invisible. The question now was what to do with that courage. Claire splashed water on her face and tried to clean the worst of the wine from her dress. It was hopeless. The fabric was ruined beyond repair. But somehow that felt fitting. Her old life had been ruined tonight too. Maybe it was time to build something new. Her phone buzzed in her clutch. A text from Dana. I just saw something on social media. Are you okay? What happened? Claire typed back quickly. Victoria poured wine on me, deliberately, in front of everyone. Marcus is calling it an accident and demanding I apologize. Dana's response came immediately. Stay where you are. I am on my way. Do not say anything else to anyone until I get there. Another buzz, another message. And Claire, whatever you do, do not let them isolate you. Stay visible. Stay in public view. Men like Marcus do their worst damage in private. Claire read the message twice, feeling a chill run down her spine. Donna was right. Marcus would be furious about what had happened. He would want to punish her for defying him, and he would not want witnesses when he did. She had to get back to the party. She had to stay where people could see her. But first, she had an idea. A risky, possibly foolish idea that could either save her or destroy her completely. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found the name she was looking for. Henry Crawford, journalist, covers high society scandals for the major publications. Claire had met Henry at a charity event 2 years ago. They had talked for an hour about everything and nothing, and she had liked him immediately. He was sharp, honest, and refreshingly unimpressed by wealth and status. More importantly, he had given her his card and told her to call if she ever had a story worth telling. She had never called. Until now, her fingers hovered over the screen. If she did this, there was no going back. If she talked to a journalist, if she went on record about what had happened tonight, she would be declaring war on Marcus and everything he represented. But Marcus had already declared war on her. He just had not expected her to fight back. Claire pressed the call button before she could change her mind. Henry answered on the third ring. His voice was surprised but interested. Claire Montgomery, I was not expecting to hear from you tonight. I have a story, Claire said, and I am ready to tell it. Claire returned to the ballroom with her head held high and her ruined dress still visible for everyone to see. She had considered trying to find something else to wear, but ultimately decided against it. The stain was evidence. Let everyone see what Victoria had done. The atmosphere in the room had changed during her absence. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by the buzzing excitement of people who sensed drama unfolding. Guests clustered in small groups, stealing glances at Claire as she made her way through the crowd. Some conversations stopped mid-sentence as she passed. Others continued in exaggerated whispers designed to be overheard. She heard fragments as she walked. Did you see what happened? One woman said to another. The mistress actually poured wine on her. I heard she tripped, a man responded. Marcus said she has been having episodes. Episodes, please. That woman targeted her deliberately. I was standing right there. Claire kept walking. Let them talk. Let them debate. The truth would come out soon enough. She spotted Henry Crawford near the orchestra, exactly where he had said he would be. He was a tall man in his mid-40s with graying temples and the keen eyes of someone who made his living uncovering secrets. He stood slightly apart from the crowd, observing everything with the detached interest of a professional witness. Claire approached him casually, as if they were simply two acquaintances exchanging pleasantries. She picked up a glass of water from a passing waiter's tray and took a slow sip, using the moment to compose herself. Thank you for coming, she said quietly. Henry inclined his head slightly. I was already here covering the gala for the paper. Standard society page stuff. Who wore what? Who talked to whom? Which business deals were whispered about over champagne? He paused and gestured subtly toward her dress. But I must say the evening just became considerably more interesting. I take it that was not an accident? No, it was deliberate. Victoria Sinclair poured an entire glass of wine on me while my husband watched and did nothing. There are dozens of witnesses. At least 50 people saw exactly what happened. Henry's expression remained neutral, but she could see the spark of professional interest in his eyes, the kind of spark that meant a story. Are you willing to go on record with that accusation? Yes, and you understand what that means? His voice dropped lower. Once this story runs, there is no taking it back. The Montgomery family has lawyers, Lots of them. They will come after you, after me, after anyone who publishes anything negative about them. Claire met his gaze steadily. I understand. I have spent 5 years being silent. I have spent 5 years letting myself be humiliated in private so my husband could maintain his perfect image in public. I have smiled at parties while he whispered to other women. I have nodded along while he told people what a wonderful marriage we have. I have become invisible in my own life. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried a new edge of steel. That ends tonight. Henry studied her face for a long moment. Whatever he saw there seemed to satisfy him. Then let us talk, he said. Tell me everything. For the next 10 minutes, Claire told him the absurd story of her marriage. Not the fairy tale version that appeared in society columns. The real version. The wine incident. Victoria's cruel words. Marcus's demand that she apologize for being humiliated. The years of affairs conducted openly, as if her feelings did not matter. The slow, systematic erasure of her identity, her opinions, her very self. She was careful not to mention the other evidence she had gathered. The documents in her locked drawer, the photographs from her private investigator, the financial records that showed exactly where Marcus's money had been going. Those secrets were for another time, another battle. But she gave Henry enough to write a story that would crack the facade of the perfect Montgomery marriage wide open. When she finished, Henry looked at her with something like respect. You know, in 20 years of covering society events, I have never had someone approach me still dripping with evidence. He gestured at the wine stains spreading across her dress. I have to say, I respect the commitment. Claire felt a small, genuine smile cross her face. It was the first time she had smiled in hours. I believe in visual aids. Henry chuckled softly. So do I. He pulled out his phone. Mind if I take a few photos? Purely for documentation purposes, of course. Be my guest. As Henry discreetly photographed her ruined dress, Claire felt something she had not felt in years. Hope. Real, tangible hope. She was not alone anymore. She had a witness. She had documentation. She had someone who would tell her side of the story. For the first time tonight, she felt like she might actually win. She should have known better. Before they could continue, a commotion near the center of the ballroom drew their attention. The orchestra stopped playing mid-song. Conversations died. All 200 guests turned toward the raised platform near the grand staircase. Marcus had climbed onto the small stage where the orchestra sat. He was gesturing for silence with both hands raised, his expression arranged into something between concern and sorrow. The perfect picture of a worried husband. Everyone, he announced, his voice carrying clearly through the room. I need to address what happened earlier this evening. Claire's stomach dropped. Whatever Marcus was about to do, it would not be good. Henry touched her arm lightly. Stay calm, he whispered. Whatever he says, stay calm. Do not give him ammunition. But Claire barely heard him. Her entire focus had narrowed to the man on the stage, the man she had married, the man she had loved, the man who was about to destroy her. My wife Claire has been struggling with some personal issues recently. Marcus's face was arranged into an expression of concerned sympathy that made Claire's skin crawl. She has been experiencing episodes of confusion and emotional instability. What happened earlier was not Victoria's fault. It was a manifestation of Claire's ongoing mental health struggles. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Claire felt the blood drain from her face. No, she whispered. No, 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 I did not want to discuss this publicly, Marcus continued, warming to his performance. He was good at this. He had always been good at this. Controlling the narrative, making people see what he wanted them to see. But given the scene she caused, I feel I owe you all an explanation. He paused, letting the suspense build. Every eye in the room was fixed on him. Every ear was straining to hear what came next. Claire has been diagnosed with delusional disorder. His voice dripped with false compassion. She sometimes sees and believes things that are not real. Tonight's incident, her claims about Victoria, are unfortunately another example of this. That is a lie. Claire's voice rang out across the ballroom before she could stop herself. She had not meant to speak. The words had torn themselves from her throat, desperate and raw. You know that is a lie. Everyone here saw what Victoria did. You all saw it. Marcus shook his head sadly. See what I mean? He turned to the crowd, his arms spread in a gesture of helplessness. She cannot even recognize reality anymore. I have been trying to protect her, trying to get her help, but she refuses to accept that she needs treatment. The guests were looking at her differently now. The sympathy she had seen moments ago was transforming into something else. Pity, doubt, the uncomfortable shuffling of people who did not want to be associated with someone mentally unstable. Claire understood then with horrifying clarity how perfectly Marcus had constructed this trap. The wine-stained dress, the tears she had cried in the bathroom. Her emotional outburst just now. It all fit the narrative he was selling. She looked exactly like what he was claiming she was. Unstable, delusional, dangerous. Victoria stood behind Marcus on the platform, barely concealing her triumphant smile. She had known. Of course she had known. This had been the plan all along. The wine was not just humiliation. It was the first act in a carefully choreographed destruction. Marcus turned to someone near the edge of the room and nodded. Two security guards stepped forward, moving toward Claire with apologetic but determined expressions. Please escort my wife somewhere quiet, Marcus said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who was used to being obeyed. She needs rest. She needs to be away from all this stimulation, for her own safety. No. Claire backed away from the approaching guards. This is insane. He is lying to all of you. I am not crazy. I am not delusional. He and his mistress have been planning this. Can you not see what they are doing? But even as she spoke, she could hear how she sounded. Desperate, frantic, paranoid. Every word she said only confirmed the story Marcus had just told. The guards reached her and took her arms, gently but firmly. Ma'am, one of them said quietly. His voice was kind, which somehow made it worse. Please come with us. We do not want to make a scene. Claire looked around desperately, searching for anyone who might help her. She found Henry's eyes in the crowd. He was watching with a journalist's careful attention, but even he could not intervene, not without becoming part of the story himself. The guests who had seemed sympathetic moments ago now wore expressions of pity and discomfort. Some looked away when she met their eyes. Others whispered to their companions. No one moved to intervene. No one spoke up in her defense. This was Marcus's true power. Not his money, not his status, not his family name. His power was the ability to control the narrative, to make everyone see what he wanted them to see, to transform truth into lies, and lies into truth with nothing more than confident words and a sympathetic smile. Please, Claire said to the guards, please, you have to believe me. I am telling the truth. The guard on her left gave her arm a gentle squeeze. We are just going to take you somewhere quiet, ma'am. That is all. Just somewhere you can rest. The guards led Claire away from the ballroom, away from the witnesses, away from any hope of rescue. She looked back over her shoulder as they walked, and the last thing she saw was Victoria stepping down from the platform to slip her arm through Marcus's. They were smiling at each other. As she was escorted through a side door into a private sitting room, Claire realized with growing horror that Marcus had anticipated her every move. He had prepared for this night. He had planned for the possibility that she might fight back, and he had constructed a trap that would swallow her whole. The door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded like the slamming of a prison gate. And now she was alone, cut off from help, facing whatever punishment her husband had devised. She placed her hand on her stomach, feeling the small swell that no one knew about. I am so sorry, she whispered to the life growing inside her. I should have been stronger. I should have left sooner. I should have protected you. But apologies would not help her now. Nothing would help her now. Or so she thought. The sitting room was beautifully appointed, with velvet furniture in deep burgundy and original artwork in gilded frames. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the moonlit gardens, where fountains sparkled under carefully positioned lights. Under other circumstances, it might have been a peaceful retreat from the chaos of the party. Tonight, it felt like a cell. Claire paced the room, her mind racing. Her heels clicked against the hardwood floor in an irregular rhythm that matched her heartbeat. Through the walls, she could hear the muffled sounds of the gala continuing without her. Music and laughter and the clink of glasses, all carrying on as if nothing had happened, as if her entire world had not just collapsed. She stopped by the window and pressed her forehead against the cool glass. Outside, the garden stretched into darkness. She could see the distant lights of neighboring estates, other mansions full of other people living their comfortable lives. None of them knew what was happening in this room. None of them would care if they did. Think, she told herself, think. There has to be a way out of this. She pulled out her phone to call Dana, but before she could dial, the door opened. A man entered wearing a white medical coat that seemed too crisp, too perfect, as if it had been pressed specifically for this occasion. He was middle-aged, perhaps 55, with salt and pepper hair and a practiced smile that did not reach his eyes. Those eyes were cold, clinical, the eyes of someone who viewed people as problems to be solved rather than human beings to be helped. "Mrs. Montgomery," he said smoothly, "I am Dr. Reynolds. Your husband asked me to come speak with you." Claire stiffened. Every instinct she had screamed that this man was dangerous. "I do not need a doctor. I am fine, Doctor." Reynolds nodded with exaggerated understanding, the way someone nods when they are humoring a child. "Of course you believe that. Unfortunately, the people suffering from delusional disorders often have limited insight into their own condition. It is one of the defining features of the illness. I do not have a delusional disorder." Claire's voice rose with frustration. She forced herself to lower it. Calm. She needed to stay calm. "My husband is lying. He and his mistress have been planning this for weeks, maybe months. What happened tonight was orchestrated to make me look unstable." The doctor held up a hand. "Mrs. Montgomery, please, let us not make this more difficult than it needs to be. Your husband has expressed grave concerns about your mental state. He loves you very much, and he is worried about your well-being." "He does not love me." Claire nearly laughed at the absurdity. "He has been having an affair for 2 years. He brought his mistress to this party. She poured wine on me in front of 200 people." Dr. Reynolds' expression did not change. "These are exactly the kinds of paranoid accusations your husband warned me about. He believes you have constructed an elaborate narrative in your mind to explain feelings of inadequacy and disconnection. It is a common symptom of—" "Stop." Claire held up her hand. "Just stop. I know what you are doing. I know why you are here. So let us skip the performance." Dr. Reynolds studied her for a moment. Then his fake smile widened. "All right," he said. "If you want to be direct, let us be direct." He pulled a document from his coat pocket and held it up so she could see it. "Your husband has medical power of attorney. He signed the paperwork this afternoon. Given what occurred at the gala tonight, he has requested a 72-hour psychiatric evaluation to ensure your safety and the safety of others." Claire stared at the document in his hands. The words swam before her eyes. Medical power of attorney, 72-hour psychiatric evaluation, safety of others. Marcus had filed for control over her medical decisions. He had done it that afternoon, hours before the gala started, which meant he had planned this from the beginning. The wine incident was not spontaneous cruelty. It was the first step in a coordinated attack designed to strip her of everything: her credibility, her freedom, her very grip on reality. "I did not agree to any power of attorney," Claire said. Her voice was shaking now. She could not stop it. "I never signed anything giving him that authority." Dr. Reynolds shrugged slightly. "The paperwork indicates otherwise. But please, Mrs. Montgomery, do not be alarmed. The evaluation is simply a precautionary measure. If you are as healthy as you claim, you will be released within 3 days." 3 days. 3 days locked in a psychiatric facility while Marcus consolidated his power, while he controlled the narrative, while he told everyone who would listen that his poor wife had finally snapped, while Victoria moved into this house, slept in Claire's bed, took over Claire's life. 3 days that would stretch into a week, then a month, then however long Marcus decided to keep her there. "You cannot do this," Claire whispered. "I have rights. I have not done anything wrong. I am not a danger to anyone." Dr. Reynolds stepped closer. His cologne was overpowering, something expensive and masculine that made her stomach turn. "The law allows for involuntary commitment when a person is deemed a danger to themselves or others. Your behavior tonight, the emotional outbursts, the paranoid accusations, the inability to distinguish reality from delusion, these are all indicators that you may harm yourself if left untreated. I am not going to harm myself. That is not for you to decide, Mrs. Montgomery. Claire was still processing this first blow when her phone buzzed in her hand. She looked down automatically, desperate for any distraction from the nightmare unfolding before her. It was a text from an unknown number. The message contained a single image, a screenshot of a banking app. Her banking app. Claire's heart stopped as she recognized the screen. It showed her joint accounts with Marcus, the checking account that had held over $200,000 from her own savings before marriage, the savings account with nearly $500,000 more. Both accounts now showed a balance of zero. Zero. A second text followed immediately, this time from Marcus himself. I warned you what would happen if you caused problems. Now you have nothing. No money, no credibility, no escape. You should have just smiled and kept your mouth shut like a good wife. Claire's legs gave out. She did not realize she was falling until she hit the velvet sofa, phone still clutched in her trembling hands. The air had been sucked from the room. She could not breathe, could not think, could not process what she was seeing. He had done it. Marcus had emptied every account she had access to, transferred every penny to somewhere she could not reach. Years of savings, her inheritance from her grandmother, the money she had been secretly setting aside for exactly this kind of emergency, gone. All of it gone. She was penniless, completely and utterly penniless. Dr. Reynolds watched her with clinical detachment. He did not ask what had happened. He did not offer comfort. He simply waited, the way a predator waits for wounded prey to stop struggling. Bad news, he asked. His voice held a hint of amusement that made Claire want to scream. Before she could answer, her phone buzzed again. This time it was a news alert. She clicked on it automatically, not even registering what she was doing. Some part of her brain was still functioning on autopilot, still going through the motions of normalcy while the rest of her fell apart. The headline that appeared made her want to throw her phone across the room. Montgomery heir files for divorce, cites wife's dangerous mental instability. She scrolled down, each word hitting her like a physical blow. The article was detailed and damning. It quoted sources close to the family describing Claire's erratic behavior over the past several months. Her delusional episodes, her paranoid accusations against her husband's innocent assistant, her refusal to seek treatment despite Marcus's loving attempts to help her. The article painted Marcus as a hero, a long-suffering husband who had tried everything to save his troubled wife, a man who had protected her privacy for as long as he could, but who was now forced to prioritize his own safety and the safety of his family. There were quotes from unnamed relatives, concerns from business associates, even a statement from a psychiatrist, not Dr. Reynolds, but someone else, discussing the dangers of untreated delusional disorder. The article had been posted 10 minutes ago, which meant Marcus had written it in advance, had prepared it long before tonight, had always intended for this to be the ending of their story. 3 catastrophes in the span of 10 minutes. She was about to be committed against her will. She had no money. Her reputation was being demolished in real time by a pre-written press release. And she was pregnant with a child whose father was trying to institutionalize her. Claire sat in the elegant sitting room, her wine-stained dress clinging to her skin, and understood with perfect clarity how completely she had been destroyed. She had thought she was building a case against Marcus. She had thought she was preparing for battle. But he had been preparing too, and his preparation had been better, more thorough, more ruthless. She had brought a knife to a gunfight, and now she was bleeding out on the floor. She placed her hand on her stomach, on the small swell that no one knew about, and whispered to the life growing inside her. What have I done to you? What kind of mother am I? I cannot even protect myself. How am I supposed to protect you? She felt the baby flutter. Just the tiniest movement, the first time she had ever felt it move, and something inside her cracked. Tears streamed down her face, not the controlled tears she had cried in the bathroom earlier. These were different, deeper, the tears of someone who had finally reached the bottom and found nothing there to catch her. Dr. Reynolds stepped closer. His voice oozed false sympathy that made her skin crawl. Mrs. Montgomery, I think it is time we discuss transportation arrangements. I have a vehicle waiting outside. The facility is very comfortable. You will have your own room, your own bathroom. It is really quite pleasant. Many of our patients describe it as restful. Claire closed her eyes. She had thought tonight would be her liberation. She had thought she would finally break free from the prison of her marriage. Instead, she was being transferred to an actual prison, one with locks on the doors and doctors who would pump her full of medication and no one who would believe a word she said. This was it. This was how it ended. Not with a dramatic confrontation, not with justice, not with the truth finally coming to light, just a quiet disappearance, just another crazy woman being taken away for her own good. Maybe Marcus was right. Maybe she was crazy. Maybe she had imagined all of it. The affairs, the cruelty, the slow erosion of everything she used to be. Maybe the problem had always been her. Dr. Reynolds reached for her arm. If you will just come with me. And then, just when everything seemed lost, the door burst open. Dana Williams stormed into the room like a force of nature. She was dressed in a power suit despite the late hour, charcoal gray with a silk blouse the color of blood. Her dark hair was pulled back severely. Her heels were high enough to be weapons. Her expression radiated the particular fury that only the best lawyers can summon on command. The kind of fury that made strong men take a step backward, which Dr. Reynolds did. "Step away from my client," Dana said. Her voice was ice and fire and the promise of absolute destruction. Right now, Dr. Reynolds recovered quickly from his surprise. He was not a man who was used to being challenged. His expression shifted from shock to condescension in the space of a heartbeat. "Ma'am, this is a private matter. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Dana did not move. She did not blink. She did not show any sign that she had heard him at all. Instead, she pulled out her phone and held it up so the doctor could see the screen. "I am Dana Williams," she said, "attorney at law, licensed in Connecticut, New York, and Massachusetts. I specialize in family law with a particular focus on cases involving domestic abuse and medical fraud." She paused, letting those last two words hang in the air. "And I just got off the phone with Judge Margaret Patterson of the Connecticut Superior Court. Perhaps you have heard of her." The doctor's confident expression flickered. Judge Patterson was notorious. A former prosecutor who had built her career putting corrupt doctors and lawyers behind bars. The mention of her name was enough to make anyone in the legal or medical profession very, very nervous. "Judge Patterson has informed me," Dana continued, "that no medical power of attorney filed today has been validated by her court. In fact, the paperwork your client," she spat the word like an insult, "supposedly filed contains several irregularities that the court is very interested in examining." She stepped closer to the doctor, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor like gunshots. "Which means whatever document you have in your pocket is worthless. You have no legal authority to detain my client. You have no legal authority to evaluate my client. You have no legal authority to touch my client in any way, shape, or form." She smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "So unless you want to spend the next 5 years defending yourself against charges of attempted kidnapping, unlawful detention, medical fraud, and practicing medicine without proper authorization, I suggest you leave this room immediately." Dr. Reynolds glanced at the paper in his hand, then back at Dana. Sweat had appeared on his forehead. His practiced smile had vanished completely. "I was told the paperwork was in order," he said. His voice had lost its smooth confidence. "I was just following instructions." Dana tilted her head. "Whose instructions exactly?" Reynolds swallowed hard. He looked at Claire, then at Donna, then at the door. The calculation in his eyes was obvious. He was weighing his options, trying to figure out which outcome would cause him the least damage. Dana helped him decide. "Let me be very clear," she said. "If you walk out that door right now, I might be willing to forget that this conversation ever happened. I might be willing to overlook the fact that you came here tonight with the intention of forcibly committing a healthy woman to a psychiatric facility on the basis of fraudulent paperwork." She paused. "But if you stay, if you argue, if you so much as look at my client the wrong way, I will make it my personal mission to ensure that you never practice medicine again. I will have your license revoked. I will have you brought before the state medical board. I will have every patient you have ever treated interviewed by investigators looking for evidence of malpractice. Her voice dropped to a whisper. And when they find it, and believe me, they will find it, I will personally ensure that you spend the rest of your professional life answering questions in courtrooms and depositions and hearings. I will make you so famous that no hospital in the country will touch you. I will make sure that every time someone searches your name on the internet, the first thing they see is the word fraud. She smiled again. So, what is it going to be? It's lasted approximately 3 seconds. There must have been a misunderstanding, he muttered. I was simply trying to help. Clearly, the situation is not what I was led to believe. Clearly. Dana stepped aside and gestured toward the door. Help yourself to the exit. Dr. Reynolds left without another word. He did not look back. The door closed behind him with a soft click. The moment he was gone, Dana's expression transformed. The Ice Queen lawyer vanished, replaced by the worried best friend who had been hiding underneath. Claire, she said, rushing forward. Oh my God, Claire. Claire burst into tears. She stood up and threw her arms around her best friend, sobbing into her shoulder with all the fear and relief and gratitude she had been holding back. The dam had broken. Everything she had been suppressing all night came flooding out in a rush of tears and shaking and half-formed words. How did you know? Claire gasped between sobs. How did you get here so fast? How did you know about the judge? How did you— Shh, Dana held her tightly. We have time for explanations later. Right now, I need you to breathe. Can you do that for me? Just breathe. Claire tried. She really did. But every breath she took seemed to dissolve into another sob. The stress of the last few hours had pushed her body to its limit. Her hands were shaking. Her legs felt weak. Her stomach was cramping in a way that scared her. The baby, she whispered. Dana, the baby. Dana pulled back immediately. Her eyes went wide. What baby? Claire, what are you talking about? I am pregnant. Claire's voice was barely audible. 14 weeks. No one knows. I have not told anyone. But my stomach hurts and I am so stressed. And what if something is wrong? Dana's face went pale. For just a moment, the unflappable lawyer looked genuinely frightened. Okay, she said, forcing her voice to stay calm. Okay, first let us sit down. She guided Claire back to the velvet sofa and sat beside her. Now tell me exactly where it hurts. Claire pressed her hand to her lower abdomen. Here, it is not sharp pain, more like cramping, like muscle tension. Dana nodded. That could be stress. Your body has been through a lot tonight. The wine incident, the confrontation, the doctor, all of it. Stress can cause cramping, especially in the first trimester. What if it is something worse? Then we will deal with it. Dana took Claire's hand and squeezed. But right now, in this moment, you need to calm down. You need to breathe. You need to let your body relax. Can you do that? Claire closed her eyes. She focused on her breathing the way she had learned in yoga classes years ago. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Slow, steady, controlled. Gradually, the cramping eased. The shaking subsided. Her heartbeat slowed from a frantic gallop to something approaching normal. Better? Dana asked. Claire nodded. Better. Good. Now, Dana's voice shifted back to business mode. Tell me everything that happened tonight. From the beginning, do not leave anything out. Claire told her, the wine incident, Marcus's public accusation, the security guards, Dr. Reynolds and his fraudulent paperwork, the emptied bank accounts, the divorce filing, the news article that was probably going viral even as they spoke. All of it came pouring out in a rush of words and emotions. Every detail, every humiliation, every moment of the trap that Marcus had so carefully constructed. When she finished, Dana's expression was terrifyingly calm. That particular stillness that meant she was already planning how to destroy everyone responsible. Okay, Dana said, first things first. That medical power of attorney, Marcus cannot enforce it. I was not bluffing about Judge Patterson. I really did call her. She is a friend from law school, and she owes me a favor. The paperwork Marcus filed has more holes than Swiss cheese. He was hoping to scare you into compliance before you could fight back. What about the bank accounts? Dana pulled out her phone and started typing. I will have a forensic accountant on this by morning. Marcus cannot just transfer marital assets without documentation. There are records. There are trails. We will freeze everything and get your access restored within 48 hours. And the news article? Claire's voice cracked. Everyone will believe him. Everyone will think I am crazy. Dana shook her head firmly. Let me worry about that. I have contacts at every major outlet. By tomorrow morning, there will be serious questions about the timing and sourcing of that article. The fact that it was published minutes after the incident, with detailed quotes and expert commentary, that does not happen organically. Someone prepared this in advance. And when we prove that, we prove premeditation. We prove conspiracy. We prove that everything Marcus did tonight was planned. She looked Claire directly in the eyes. We will make this work for us, Claire. We will show the world exactly what kind of man Marcus Montgomery really is. For the first time since the wine had splashed across her dress, Claire felt something like hope. But there is something else, she said slowly. Something I have not told you. Something that changes everything. Dana's eyes sharpened. What? Claire hesitated. Then she placed her hand on her stomach in the gesture that had become automatic over the past 14 weeks. I am pregnant, she said again. And Dana? She paused, gathering her courage. It is not Marcus's baby. Dana stared at her. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then very quietly, whose is it? Claire closed her eyes. The truth she had been hiding for months finally forced its way out. Before I found out about Victoria, before I knew how bad things really were, I had a moment of weakness. There was a man, someone kind, someone who saw me when Marcus looked right through me. It only happened once, one night, and then I ended it because I thought I owed my marriage another chance. She opened her eyes. 2 weeks later, I found out I was pregnant. And 2 weeks after that, I realized what Marcus was planning. That is why I have been keeping it secret, not just because of the divorce, but because if Marcus finds out this baby is not his, he will use it to destroy me completely. Dana absorbed this information. Her expression shifted through several emotions before settling on fierce determination. This changes things, she said. In a good way, if the baby is not his, he has no claim to it. No custody rights, no visitation, no leverage. She leaned forward. A pregnant woman being publicly humiliated by her husband and his mistress. A pregnant woman being threatened with involuntary commitment. A pregnant woman whose husband emptied her bank accounts and filed for divorce on the same night. Dana's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Claire, this is not just a divorce case anymore. This is a war. And we just got nuclear weapons. Before Claire could respond, her phone buzzed again. She looked down automatically, flinching in anticipation of another attack. But it was not from Marcus. It was a text from an assistant at the gala. Richard Montgomery wants to see you in his private study. Says it is urgent. He says you will want to hear what he has to say. Claire showed the message to Dana. What do you think? Dana frowned. Richard Montgomery? Marcus's father? He has never exactly been in your corner. Why would he want to help now? I do not know. Claire remembered Richard's strange words earlier in the evening, the way he had looked at her, the weight behind every word. But he told me not to leave before his announcement. He said I needed to stay close. He said something was coming. She looked at Dana. Something is going on, something bigger than Marcus and Victoria. I can feel it. Dana considered for a moment. Then she nodded. All right, let us go see what the patriarch has to say. But I am coming with you. You are not facing anyone alone tonight. Together they made their way through the mansion's private corridors, past paintings worth more than most houses, past statues that had been in the Montgomery family for generations. The sounds of the gala faded behind them until all Claire could hear was the clicking of their heels and the pounding of her own heart. They reached Richard Montgomery's private study. The door was slightly ajar, warm light spilling through the crack like an invitation or a trap. Claire knocked softly and pushed the door open. Richard stood by the window, his back to them, gazing out at the gardens below. Moonlight and lamplight combined to cast his shadow long across the floor. He looked older somehow, smaller, as if the weight of the evening had compressed him. You came, he said, without turning around. Good. We have much to discuss. And Claire understood then that Richard had known. He had known what Marcus was planning. He had known what Victoria would do. He had known about the wand and the doctor and the bank accounts in the news article. He had been waiting for this night, preparing for it, positioning all the pieces on the board. The only question was which side he was playing for. Richard turned slowly from the window. His face was older than Claire had ever seen it, carved with lines of regret and exhaustion that seemed to have appeared overnight. This was not the commanding patriarch who ruled Montgomery Holdings with an iron will. This was not the man who had built a $2.3 billion empire through sheer force of determination. This was a tired old man facing the consequences of a lifetime of mistakes. "Sit down, Claire," he said quietly. "There are things you need to know." Claire remained standing. Dana positioned herself slightly behind and to the side, ready to intervene if necessary. Neither of them trusted Richard Montgomery. Not yet. Maybe not ever. "I know what Marcus did tonight," Richard continued. "I know about the wine. I know about the psychiatric evaluation he tried to arrange. I know about the bank accounts and the press release." He met Claire's eyes directly. "I know everything, because I have been watching him plan it for months." Claire felt her breath catch in her throat. The confession was so unexpected, so blatant, that for a moment she thought she must have misheard. "You knew," her voice came out strangled. "You knew what he was going to do, and you did not stop him?" "No," Richard's voice was heavy with something that might have been shame. "I did not stop him. I let it happen. I watched my son plot to destroy his wife, and I did nothing to prevent it." "Why?" Claire demanded. The word tore itself from her throat. "Why would you do that? What kind of father watches his son commit what amounts to psychological torture and does nothing?" Richard was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "The kind of father who needed to see it for himself. The kind who had been making excuses for 30 years and finally ran out of ways to pretend." He moved to the large mahogany desk that dominated the center of the room. His hand trembled slightly as he opened a drawer and pulled out a thick folder. "Let me tell you a story, Claire. A story about a boy who grew up believing the world owed him everything. A story about a father who taught him that lesson." He set the folder on the desk but did not open it yet. When Marcus was 7 years old, he pushed another child off the playground equipment. The child broke his arm. "Do you know what I did?" Claire shook her head. "I paid off the family, wrote them a check big enough that they forgot their son ever had a broken arm. And I told Marcus that accidents happen, that it was not his fault, that everything would be fine." Richard's voice hardened. When Marcus was 15, he was caught cheating on his exams. The school wanted to expel him. "Do you know what I did?" "You paid them off," Claire said quietly. "I built them a new gymnasium. And I told Marcus that the important thing was results, not methods. That people like us do not play by the same rules as everyone else." He began to pace, his footsteps heavy on the Persian rug. When Marcus was 22, he got a girl pregnant. A nice girl, smart, kind. She wanted to keep the baby. "Do you know what I did?" Claire did not answer. She was not sure she wanted to hear. "I offered her money to have an abortion. When she refused, I offered her more money to sign away her parental rights. I told her that my son had a bright future and she was standing in the way of it." He stopped pacing and looked at Claire with eyes full of ancient guilt. "She took the money. She disappeared. And Marcus never even knew he had a child. I made sure of that." The room was absolutely silent. Dana, who had been standing guard near the door, made a small sound of disgust. Claire said nothing. There was nothing to say. "I have spent 30 years protecting my son," Richard continued, "covering up his mistakes, cleaning up his messes. Every time he did something wrong, I fixed it. Every time he hurt someone, I made it disappear." His voice cracked. "I thought I was being a good father. I thought I was giving him the tools to succeed. I thought if I protected him enough times, he would eventually learn to protect himself." He shook his head slowly. "I was wrong. I was so wrong. All I did was teach him that he could do anything without consequences. All I did was create a monster." He turned back to the desk and opened the thick folder. "When you married Marcus 5 years ago, I saw something in you, something I recognized." Claire frowned. "What do you mean?" Richard pulled a photograph from the folder. It was old, faded at the edges. "Man, edge," showing a young woman with dark hair and kind eyes. My wife, Eleanor, he said. Your mother-in-law. She died when Marcus was 6. I know, Claire said. Marcus told me she had cancer. Richard shook his head. That is the story we told people. The truth is more complicated. He looked at the photograph with an expression of profound grief. Eleanor did not die of cancer. She died of a broken heart. She spent 12 years married to a man who was never home. A man who prioritized his company over his family. A man who made her feel invisible in her own house. He looked up at Claire. Sound familiar? Claire felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back. Yes, she whispered. It sounds familiar. Eleanor tried to leave me once, Richard continued. She packed her bags. She had a lawyer. She was ready to fight for custody of Marcus and walk away from this family forever. What happened? I talked her out of it. Richard's voice was bitter. I promised I would change. I promised I would be better. I promised that if she gave me one more chance, I would be the husband she deserved. And I lied. Richard set down the photograph. I went right back to my old habits. The company, the deals, the endless pursuit of more money, more power, more success. Eleanor stayed because she loved me. She stayed because she believed in our family. She stayed because she thought I would eventually keep my promises. He paused. She died waiting for me to become someone worth loving. The grief in his voice was so raw, so real, that Claire felt her own heart ache in response. Whatever else Richard Montgomery was, whatever sins he had committed, this pain was genuine. When I saw you marry my son, he said, I knew I was watching history repeat itself. Another good woman being destroyed by Montgomery, selfishness, and Montgomery pride. Another quiet, graceful person being slowly erased by a man who did not deserve her. He tapped the folder with one finger. So I did something Marcus does not know about. Something I have kept secret for 5 years, waiting for the right moment to reveal it. Claire stepped closer to the desk, her heart pounding. What is in there? Richard opened the folder and spread its contents across the desk surface. Documents covered in legal language. Signatures, official seals. When you signed your prenuptial agreement, he explained, there was a clause buried in the fine print. A clause my lawyers added without Marcus's knowledge. Claire leaned in, trying to make sense of the dense legal text. What kind of clause? An infidelity clause. Richard met her eyes. If Marcus ever engaged in adultery, abuse, or conduct unbecoming of a Montgomery heir, the entire prenuptial agreement becomes void. Every protection he thought he had disappears. Dana stepped forward, her professional interest clearly piqued. She picked up one of the documents and scanned it rapidly. This is real, she said, her voice filled with surprise. This is legally binding. You actually modified the prenup without your son's knowledge or consent. I modified it to protect his wife from his worst impulses, Richard said firmly. I knew what kind of man he was becoming. I could not stop him from marrying you, but I could make sure that when he inevitably betrayed you, you would not leave with nothing. Claire stared at the documents. Her mind struggled to process what she was hearing. Are you saying that I am entitled to 50% of everything Marcus owns? Richard confirmed. His stake in the company, his personal investments, his real estate holdings. All of it became fair game the first time he touched Victoria Sinclair. The room seemed to spin around Claire. For years, Marcus had threatened her with financial ruin if she ever tried to leave. For years, she had believed she would walk away with nothing. And all along, his own father had been preparing a safety net she never knew existed. But Richard was not finished. There is more, he said, something else I have been keeping secret. He reached into the folder and pulled out a single document, different from the others. It was marked with official seals and notarized signatures. The letterhead bore the logo of a Connecticut real estate attorney. This mansion, he said, the Greenwich estate, it is not part of Montgomery Holdings. It was my personal property, separate from the corporate assets. He held out the document to Claire. And on your wedding day, I transferred ownership to your name. Claire took the paper with trembling hands. She read it once, then twice. Then a third time, sure she must be misunderstanding. This cannot be right, she whispered. This says that you own this house. Richard nodded slowly. Have for 5 years. Marcus does not know. Victoria does not know. My lawyers only found out last week when I asked them to prepare the paperwork for tonight. Claire looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. Why would you do this for me? You barely know me. You have spent 5 years treating me like furniture. Why would you secretly protect me? Richard was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. Because I saw Eleanor in you. The same strength, the same quiet grace, the same willingness to endure things no one should have to endure. He turned back toward the window, his reflection ghostly in the dark glass. I could not save my wife. I did not even know she needed saving until it was too late. But when I saw you marry my son, when I saw the light in your eyes start to dim the same way Eleanor's did, I promised myself I would not fail again. He turned back to face Claire. I could not stop Marcus from hurting you. He is my son, and despite everything, I loved him too much to expose him before he exposed himself. But I could make sure that when he finally showed the world who he truly is, you would have the weapons to fight back. Claire wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. The information was overwhelming. The prenup, the house, Richard's decades of guilt and attempted redemption. What do you want me to do with all this? She asked. Richard straightened, and some of his old authority returned to his posture. The patriarch emerged from the grieving father. I want you to go back into that ballroom. I want you to stand in front of everyone Marcus tried to impress tonight, and I want you to tell them the truth. He picked up the folder and handed it to her. These documents are yours now. Use them however you see fit. Destroy my son if you must. I will not stop you. I will not protect him anymore. He paused. But whatever you decide, know that you have never been as powerless as Marcus wanted you to believe. You have never been as alone as he made you feel. And you have never been as worthless as he convinced you that you were. Claire looked at the folder in her hands, then at Dana, whose expression had shifted from suspicion to something approaching respect, then at the old man who had given her weapons she never knew she had. For 5 years, she had been silent. For 5 years, she had been invisible. For 5 years, she had let herself be defined by her husband's cruelty and her own fear. But not anymore. She placed her hand on her stomach, where her baby grew. A baby Marcus did not know about. A baby who would never know him as a father. A baby who would grow up knowing that their mother had fought back. Let us end this, she said. Richard nodded. His eyes glistened with tears he was too proud to shed. Go, he said. Show them all who you really are. Claire turned toward the door. Dana fell into step beside her, and together they walked back toward the ballroom, where 200 witnesses waited to hear the truth. Claire walked back into the ballroom with Richard on one side and Dana on the other. Her dress was still stained with wine. Her makeup was still smeared from crying. But something had changed in the way she held herself. Something had shifted in her eyes. She no longer looked like a victim. She looked like a woman who had finally decided to fight. The crowd parted as she moved through them. Whispers followed in her wake, but they carried a different tone now. Curious rather than pitying, expectant rather than dismissive. Marcus spotted her from across the room. He was standing with Victoria near the bar, clearly celebrating what he believed was his victory. His smile faltered when he saw his father walking beside his wife. Dad? Marcus pushed through the guests toward them. What is going on? I thought Claire was being what? Richard cut him off. Being evaluated, being committed, being disposed of like an inconvenience? Marcus's face went pale. His eyes darted to Claire, then to his father, then to the crowd of guests who had fallen silent to watch. Dad, this is not... Richard held up a hand. Do not speak. For once in your life, just listen. He turned to the room at large and raised his voice so everyone could hear. You all came here tonight expecting me to announce the next CEO of Montgomery Holdings. I will make that announcement shortly. But first I need to correct some misinformation that has been spreading. The crowd pressed closer, phones appearing in hands, everyone sensing that something unprecedented was about to happen. My daughter-in-law, Claire, does not have a mental illness. Richard's voice was clear and commanding. She has not been diagnosed with any disorder. She has not been experiencing delusions. What she has been experiencing is a marriage to a man who has been unfaithful, dishonest, and deliberately cruel. Gasps rippled through the guests. Victoria's confident smile vanished. What you witnessed tonight, the benign, the accusations, the press release, was a coordinated attack designed to destroy an innocent woman. Richard paused, letting his words sink in. I have spent 30 years building this company, building this family's name. I have made many mistakes along the way, mistakes I am only now beginning to understand. But the biggest mistake was protecting my son from the consequences of his actions. He turned to face Marcus directly. That ends tonight. Marcus's face had gone from pale to flushed. Dad, you cannot seriously believe her over your own son. Claire is obviously manipulating you. She is not manipulating anyone. Richard's voice cracked like a whip. But you have been manipulating everyone for years. You have been lying, cheating, stealing. Stealing? Marcus laughed nervously. That is ridiculous. I have never stolen anything in my life. Richard did not respond to that. Instead, he turned to Claire and nodded. This was her moment. Everything she had been building toward for months. Everything she had kept secret, preparing for the day she would need it most. Claire stepped forward and addressed the crowd. 7 years ago, my brother James worked for a company called Whitmore Financial. He discovered that someone was embezzling millions of dollars through a series of shell companies. Before he could report what he found, he was framed. Evidence was planted on his computer. He was arrested, tried, and convicted. He spent 8 years in prison for a crime he did not commit. The room was absolutely silent. 3 weeks ago, with the help of a forensic accountant, I finally gathered enough evidence to prove who really stole that money. Claire looked directly at her husband. The real embezzler was Marcus. The crowd erupted. Voices rose in shock and disbelief. Marcus took a step backward, his face contorting with panic. That is insane, he sputtered. I was 28 years old. I was not even involved with Whitmore. Claire pulled out her phone and connected it to the room's audio-visual system. Dana had prepared everything in advance. Images appeared on the large screens positioned around the ballroom room. Bank records, wire transfers, corporate documents tracing money from Whitmore Financial through a maze of offshore accounts that led directly back to Marcus Montgomery. $4.7 million, Claire said. Stolen over 18 months. And when my brother got too close to the truth, you destroyed his life to protect yourself. Marcus looked around wildly, searching for support. Victoria had backed away from him, her survival instincts telling her to distance herself from the sinking ship. These documents are fabricated, Marcus insisted, but his voice had lost its confidence. She is trying to frame me. These documents were submitted to the FBI 2 weeks ago, Claire replied calmly. They are reviewing the case now. I expect charges will be filed within the month. Richard stepped forward. His face was gray with shock and disappointment. Marcus, he said quietly, tell me this is not true. Marcus opened his mouth, but no words came out. For the first time in his life, he had no excuse, no spin, no way to talk himself out of the consequences of his actions. The silence stretched for 1 heartbeat, 2, 3, and then Victoria Sinclair stepped forward, deciding apparently that her best chance of survival was to go on the offensive. This is touching, she announced, her voice dripping with sarcasm. The patriarch defending his poor, innocent daughter-in-law. But I think everyone should know what Claire has been hiding. She pulled out her own phone and projected images onto the screens. Photographs appeared, Claire having dinner with a man, Claire laughing with him in a park, Claire hugging him outside a hotel. Claire has been having her own affair, Victoria declared triumphantly. If anyone should be accused of betrayal, it is her. The crowd murmured in confusion. The momentum that had been building against Marcus suddenly shifted. Claire felt her heart stop. She knew exactly who the man in the photos was, and she knew that explaining the truth would put him in danger. The man was her brother James, recently released from prison, trying to rebuild his life in secret so that Marcus could not discover him and interfere. If she revealed his identity, Marcus would use every resource he had to destroy James again. He would dig into James's past, publicize his wrongful conviction, make sure no one ever gave him a second chance. But if she stayed silent, everyone would believe she was an adulteress. Her credibility would be destroyed. Everything she had just revealed would be dismissed as the ravings of a scorned woman. She was trapped. Again. Victoria smiled, sensing victory. Nothing to say, Claire? Of course not, because there is nothing you can say. Claire looked at the photos on the screen. She looked at the faces of the crowd, confusion and judgment mixing in their expressions. She looked at Marcus, whose panic had transformed into hope that he might escape after all. And then she felt something she had been waiting 14 weeks to feel. The baby kicked, a tiny flutter of movement deep inside her. The first sign of the life she was carrying, a reminder that she was not just fighting for herself anymore. In that moment, Claire made her decision. The man in those photographs is my brother, she said clearly. His name is James. He was released from prison 3 months ago after serving 8 years for a crime Marcus committed. The room went still. I have been helping him rebuild his life, meeting him for dinners, supporting him as he tried to find work and housing and some kind of normalcy after nearly a decade behind bars. She stepped toward Victoria, her voice hardening. You took surveillance photos of a sister visiting her wrongfully imprisoned brother and tried to use them to destroy me. She paused, but I suppose I should not be surprised. This is not your first attempt to destroy someone, is it, Victoria? Victoria's smile finally cracked. Claire turned to the crowd and continued speaking, her voice steady and clear. 6 months ago, I hired a private investigator, not because I suspected Marcus of cheating. I already knew about that. I wanted to understand who Victoria Sinclair really was. Victoria's face went pale. She tried to step backward, but the crowd had closed in around them, blocking any escape. Victoria Sinclair is not her real name, Claire continued. Her birth name is Victoria Marsh, and this is not her first wealthy family. Claire gestured to Dana, who pulled up a new set of documents on the screens. In 2019, Victoria targeted Harold Pemberton, a 72-year-old widower worth $30 million. She became his caretaker, then his fiancé. He died 6 months later. Natural causes, supposedly. Victoria inherited $8 million. Murmurs of shock rippled through the guests. In 2021, she moved to Boston with a new identity. Same playbook. This time it was Robert Hayes, 68, recently divorced. He died of a heart attack 4 months after their engagement. Victoria inherited $5 million. Victoria's voice came out strangled. Those men were sick before I met them. Claire raised her hand. Maybe they were. But here is the interesting part. Both of them had significant amounts of a cardiac medication in their systems when they died. Medication that neither of them had prescriptions for. The gasps from the crowd were audible. I am not accusing you of murder, Victoria. Claire's voice was calm, almost conversational. I am simply sharing information. The authorities can decide what to do with it. From somewhere in the back of the room, a guest called out loudly, "Well, I am definitely not eating anything she brought to this party." Nervous laughter broke the tension briefly, but the moment of levity could not dispel the horror that had settled over the room. Victoria looked around desperately. "Marcus," she pleaded, "tell them she is lying. Tell them." But Marcus was not listening to her. Marcus was staring at his father with an expression of dawning comprehension. "You planned this," he said slowly. "You knew what she had. You have been waiting for this." Richard's face was a mask of stone. "I have been waiting for you to become the man I raised you to be. Instead, I watched you become a monster. You cannot do this to me." Marcus's voice rose. "I am your son. I am the heir to everything you built. You cannot just—" "Actually," Richard interrupted, "I can." He turned to address the crowd. "I came here tonight planning to announce the next CEO of Montgomery Holdings. That announcement will still happen, but not the way anyone expected." He paused, and the weight of 3 decades of building an empire seemed to settle on his shoulders. Effective immediately, Marcus Montgomery is removed from all positions within the company. His shares will be frozen, pending the outcome of the federal investigation. He will have no authority, no access, and no role in the future of Montgomery Holdings. Marcus made a strangled sound of disbelief. "Furthermore," Richard continued, "I am stepping down as CEO myself. I have spent too long prioritizing this company over the people I should have been protecting. It is time for someone else to lead." The crowd buzzed with speculation. If not Marcus, then who? Richard turned to look at someone near the edge of the room. The crowd followed his gaze to a woman in her early 40s who had been watching the entire drama unfold with careful attention. The new CEO of Montgomery Holdings will be my daughter, Rebecca Montgomery. Richard smiled slightly. Who has been running our European operations for 15 years without a single scandal or controversy? Imagine that. Rebecca stepped forward, her expression a mixture of surprise and determination. She had clearly not expected this, but she was ready for it. Marcus screamed, "You are giving my company to her? To my sister who has never—" "It was never your company," Richard's voice was final. "It was always the company I built, and I will give it to whoever I believe will honor what it represents." Marcus looked around wildly, searching for any ally, any support, any way out of the catastrophe closing in around him. He found nothing. Even the guests who had been his friends, his supporters, his admirers for years now looked at him with disgust and disappointment. Victoria tried to slip away through the crowd, but two security guards that Richard had quietly summoned stepped into her path. "Miss Sinclair," one of them said politely, "please remain here. The police would like to speak with you." "The police?" Victoria's voice rose to a shriek. "You cannot do this. I have not done anything wrong." "That is for the authorities to determine," Richard replied. "But given the information that has come to light tonight, I think it is best if you stay until they arrive." Claire watched it all unfold with a strange sense of detachment. Part of her had dreamed of this moment for years. Part of her had imagined the satisfaction of watching Marcus finally face the consequences of his actions. But standing here now, watching her husband's world crumble around him, she felt no joy, only exhaustion and relief and a profound sadness for the wasted years. Marcus turned to her one last time. His face was twisted with rage and desperation. "This is not over," he hissed. "You think you have won? You think you can just take everything from me?" Claire met his gaze steadily. "I am not taking anything from you, Marcus. I am simply revealing who you really are." She paused. "The same thing you have tried to do to me tonight. The only difference is that I told the truth." She turned away from him then, dismissing him with the same casual cruelty he had shown her for 5 years. It was the most satisfying moment of her life. The gala ended early that night. Police arrived to question Victoria. FBI agents appeared to discuss the embezzlement charges with Marcus. Guests filtered out in stunned silence, already composing the messages they would send to friends who had not been there to witness the spectacle. By midnight, the ballroom was empty, except for Claire, Dana, and Richard. They sat in the study where Richard had revealed his secrets earlier, a bottle of expensive whiskey on the table between them, though Claire had only sparkling water in deference to her secret, a secret she was finally ready to share. "There is something else I need to tell you," she said, her voice quiet in the stillness of the room. Richard looked at her with tired eyes. "After tonight, I cannot imagine what else there could be." Claire placed her hand on her stomach in the gesture that had become automatic. "I am pregnant. 14 weeks." The room went completely silent. Richard stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly his eyes filled with tears. "Does Marcus know?" "No, and he never will." Claire's voice was firm. "This child will never know him as a father. They will know him as a cautionary tale about what happens when you confuse cruelty for strength." Richard nodded slowly. "And will they know me?" Claire considered the question carefully. She looked at this old man who had made so many mistakes, who had protected his son's worst impulses for decades, who had finally chosen to do the right thing when it mattered most. "If you want to be different," she said finally, "truly different, then yes, this child will have a grandfather. But not the Richard Montgomery who covered up his son's crimes for 30 years. A new one who finally chose to do the right thing." Richard wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "Oh, then I would like that. Very much." Dana raised her glass. "To new beginnings." "To new beginnings," Claire echoed. She looked around the study of the house that now belonged to her, the house where she had felt so small for so long, the house where she would raise her child in freedom and truth. "Here is what I have learned," she thought to herself. "It is never too late to become who you should have been. Not for Richard, not for me, and not for this baby, who will grow up knowing that their mother chose courage over comfort, truth over peace, and self-respect over everything else." 6 months passed. Marcus was arrested on federal embezzlement charges. He was denied bail after prosecutors argued he was a flight risk. The last Claire heard, he was awaiting trial in an orange jumpsuit, looking 10 years older than his actual age. Victoria fled to Mexico 2 days after the gala. She was currently wanted for questioning in 2 states regarding suspicious deaths. Her Instagram feed was now nothing but photos of beaches and captions about starting fresh, which the internet mocked mercilessly. James was fully exonerated based on the evidence Claire had compiled. The state awarded him $2.3 million in wrongful conviction compensation. He now worked as a financial crimes consultant for the FBI, using his painful experience to help others. He lived in the guest house of the Greenwich estate, finally at peace after 8 years of injustice. Richard had stepped down from Montgomery Holdings, but found a new purpose. He funded a legal defense fund for wrongfully convicted individuals. He spent every Sunday at Claire's house, learning to cook badly and laughing at his own failures in a way he never had when he was busy building an empire. And Claire? Claire stood on the balcony of her mansion, 8 months pregnant now, watching the sun set over Long Island Sound. Her life looked nothing like it had 6 months ago. Dana arrived for their weekly dinner, letting herself in with the key when Claire had given her. "So," Dana said, joining her on the balcony, "any regrets?" "About what?" "About blowing up your entire life in front of 200 people." Claire considered the question as she watched the colors spread across the water. "I regret not doing it sooner. I regret every year I spent being quiet. I regret every time I let someone else tell me who I was." She touched her stomach, feeling her child move inside her. "But I do not regret who I am becoming, and I do not regret giving this baby a mother who knows how to fight." Dana smiled. "Good answer." They stood together in comfortable silence as the sun sank below the horizon. 1 week before her due date, Claire received a letter. It arrived without fanfare, mixed in with the usual bills and junk mail. The postmark was from somewhere in Central America. There was no return address. Claire opened it with trembling fingers. "Dear Claire," the letter began, "you think you have won. You have the house, the money, the sympathy of everyone who matters. You destroyed my life. But here is something you do not know." Marcus was not the only Montgomery who knew about the embezzlement. Richard knew too. He helped cover it up. "Why do you think your brother went to prison so easily?" "Because Richard Montgomery made sure the right people were paid off. Your beloved father-in-law is not the reformed hero he is pretending to be. He is just better at playing the long game. Ask him about the night of April 14th, 2016. Ask him what he did to protect his son. You do not have to believe me, but you will always wonder." The letter was signed with a single letter, V. Claire read it 3 times, then she walked to the window and looked out at the garden, where Richard was playing with the neighbor's dog, laughing genuinely for the first time in months. Did she believe Victoria? Did it matter? She folded the letter carefully and placed it in the safe in her study. The same safe where Richard had kept the deed to her house. The same safe where all the secrets of the Montgomery family now resided. Here is the final lesson I have learned, CERN, she thought. Sometimes the truth is complicated. Sometimes the people who save you are also the people who hurt others. Sometimes you have to decide what kind of truth you can live with. I do not know if I will ever ask Richard about April 14th. I do not know if I want to know the answer. But I do know this. Whatever happens next, I will face it with my eyes open. Because I am not the woman who stood in that ballroom covered in wine anymore. I am someone new, someone stronger, someone who writes her own story. She closed the safe and locked it. Some secrets keep us safe. Some destroy us. The trick is knowing which is which and being brave enough to act when the time comes. Claire placed her hands on her stomach and felt her baby kick. "It is almost time," she whispered. "And whatever the future holds, we will face it together." Outside, the last light of day faded into dusk. A new chapter was about to begin, and this time Claire would be the one writing it.